Hello everyone, I'm back with another video, and I'm just kind of surprised at how many people watched my first tutorial for step-by-step guide on how to make a plugin. Today we're going to talk about custom configuration files for your plugins. The second thing we're going to talk about is codecs. These are kind of like translators, and you're going to need them a lot for Hytale modding, so it kind of helps to understand or have a basic example of using codecs. All right, so we're back in our project that we created from the first video, and then we modified it in the second video to add this block break event system. I modified it some more to add these comments to kind of clarify what an archetype is, what archetype chunk is, entity reference or a reference to the entity store, and the index. These things weren't really clear in my last tutorial. I left some comments here. If you want me to go over them in depth, I'll go over them in depth, let me know. But these comments are just to guide you while watching the video, and they might help you in the future if you're creating something on your own. If you guys remember, last time we created this event system, and this event system literally just told the player they mined a block and what the block ID they mined was. Let's say we wanted to only detect certain blocks being broken. We could go in and do if block id dot equals test, right? Or let's say dirt, and we can negate that and return if it doesn't. So here I said if the block id is not dirt, return. But what if we wanted multiple blocks? If we wanted multiple blocks, we'd probably make some type of list like this, and we name it allowed blocks equals new array list. We can actually even initialize this list with some values like dirt and grass. And then here we can do if not allowed blocks dot contains block ID return. This works perfectly fine, but the only problem with this approach is that admins or users of your plugin in general can't modify these values because they're in the code. So let's say we wanted to give the user the ability to modify these values. That's where configs come in. I'm going to right click my package me.ollie, and I'm going to do new package, call it config. And then I'm going to do new Java class. I'm going to call this block break config. Okay, now that I've created the class, we can go ahead and add some type of variable that tracks our allowed block list. So I'm going to do private string array, and I'm going to do allowed blocks. And then I'm going to initialize it to some allowed blocks, maybe like soil underscore dirt. That's what they call dirt in the game. And for now, I'll just leave it at that. Our allowed blocks in this case would just be dirt. This is just the ID of dirt in the game. Next, in the top left of IntelliJ, press the hamburger menu, hover over code, press generate, and then press getter, and then hit enter. This is going to create a getter method for your variable. I'm going to go ahead and move it down here. Another thing you can do instead of creating a getter or setter for everything, you can actually use something called lombok. Not going to go over how to set up lombok in this video, but I think it's definitely worth it. It reduces a lot of manual effort, but your IDE can also, like I said, just generate you the getters and setters if you press generate and getter and or setter, or both getter and setter. But for now, I'm going to use @getter. If you don't have lombok set up, again, do code generate getter and hit enter, and then it'll create it for you. Now that we have our variable and we have a getter method, we should go back to our system. In the block break system, we're going to want to pass a reference to our config. So what we do is private final config of type block break config. So if you look at the config class, it's just any type T. It doesn't need to extend anything. If this said like T extends config, then our config class would have to extend what it specifies. And we're going to need to initialize this config in the constructor. I recommend doing Alt and Enter on your keyboard, and then hit Enter one more time, so you don't have to keep lifting your hand off the keyboard and going onto the mouse when you're coding. In the last video, I showed you guys the Control Alt V shortcut, which creates a variable for you. Now you're going to get an error here, but for now we can ignore that. Now we're going to go down to the handle method, and the first thing we're going to want to do is config.get. This config.get method will actually cast your config to your config class. So when you type config.get, your variable should be block break config or whatever you named it. So now that we have a block break config, we're going to be able to access everything inside this class. And since I have a getter here, we can do block break config.get allowed blocks. And then we're going to go down here, and below this string block ID, we're going to put block break config.get allowed blocks .stream and any match. So this method is pretty self-explanatory. It's going to check if anything matches a given predicate. or aka condition. We can specify our condition here. If you don't know lambdas, I'd recommend watching a quick video on lambdas, but you can feel free to copy me, but you might get confused if you don't learn lambdas. So we're going to do any match, and we're going to do ID. It's kind of like a loop, and this ID variable that I defined is each value that's in this string array. So we're going to do ID dot equals ignore case, and we're going to do block ID. So essentially, we're checking if any of the IDs in this string array match our block ID. So if a player breaks a dirt block, it's going to give us a block ID of soil underscore dirt. And we have soil underscore dirt here, so it's going to return true here. And then this is turning yellow because right now the result of the stream is ignored. So what we're going to do is do that shortcut, Control-Alt-V, and we're going to get the result of this stream right here. And we're going to call it has broken block ID. It's kind of a long name, but trust me, it's more helpful to be verbose and be able to read your code in the future than to just have a quick variable here called F or B and not know what it does in the future. So this is more of a specific variable, and it'll help you in the future to read your code. So now that we have this variable, we can check if not has block broken ID, then return. So if the array does not have our block ID, we're going to return and not do anything. If it does, then we're going to go on to this part of the code. But there's even a better way to simplify this. Instead of doing any match, we can actually change this to none match, and it inverts it for us. So we can even get rid of this exclamation point and change this variable name by doing Shift F6, but you can also right click, hit rename, and change this to something like not has broken block ID. So now, if not has broken block ID, return. If the array here does not contain our block ID here, which is the block that's been broken, then we can return. Otherwise, we'll send this message. So let's move on to this error. Here we're going to see that it's expecting a constructor argument, but we don't have our config set up. First step for us is going to be to initialize this config. So we're going to do private final config of type block break config, and this is really cool. In Spigot or Minecraft plugin development, they actually didn't have a constructor for the main class, but here we do, so we can actually initialize things in the constructor, which is amazing. To initialize this, we're going to do Alt plus Enter again. I'm going to do that again. Alt plus Enter, down arrow once, initialize in constructor, and it's going to automatically try to set it to null. You're going to do backspace, and you're going to do this dot with config. You're going to name this config. I'm going to name it block break config. You can name this whatever you want. I just chose block break config, and then you're going to do comma, and it takes in a config codec. So now we're going to talk about codecs. What we're going to do is block break config dot codec, and this is going to be red because we didn't create any codec. After you type this in, you're going to want to hit enter, and it'll get rid of the box, and then select this codec and do Alt plus Enter. And this will allow you to create a variable without having to manually do it. So Alt plus Enter, and then hit enter one more time. And then this will automatically create the codec variable in the right class for you. I'm going to put a space between this allowed blocks variable and the codec just because I think it looks cleaner. You don't have to if you don't want to. Okay, so now we have our variable, but we still need to initialize it. So what we're going to do is we're going to start typing builder codec, and this method should pop up here. The method that says buildercodec.builder.build. You're going to want to double click on this, and it's going to auto-complete it for you. Make sure you're pressed into the parentheses here, and you're going to want to hit Control P to show what this method takes. And it looks like it takes a class and a supplier. Since this codec is going to be for our block break config, the class type is going to be block break config.class. I'm going to put this on a new line, and then I'm going to do comma. The second argument here for the first line is going to be supplier of type object supplier. This is where you tell the codec how to initialize this class. So you can simply put block break config new, just like this. It should autocomplete for you. And now this block break config will turn gray. If you hover over it, you can press remove type argument. Next, we need to tell the codec how to translate this allowed blocks variable. You're going to press your mouse right after the last parenthesis here, right before the dot build. So right here. And then you're going to do dot append. And what you're going to append is the definition for this allowed blocks. So first it takes in a keyed codec. So we're going to do new keyed codec. and then Control P again to see inside, and it says string key and then codec object codec. So first of all, you can put your key, and I'm going to call this allowed blocks so that we know it goes for the allowed blocks. And this is also what shows up inside the config JSON file itself. So whenever a user is editing the config file, they'll know exactly what this does. One quick note here, keys cannot have a lowercase first letter. I tried to do this and it threw an error, so just be careful. Then we're going to do comma and then Control P again. And here we just need to pass in a codec type. So what we're going to do is codec dot string array. So the type of builder codec here should match the type of variable we are initializing. And if you auto-completed, you'll notice that in the little chevrons here, it says object. So you just want to delete that. And now there's going to be a red underline because we haven't completed filling this method out, this append method. So next it needs a setter, and that's a by consumer. So we're going to use a lambda here, and we're going to do comma. After this parenthesis that comes after string array, after this parenthesis, put a comma. Then I like to make a new line and then do parentheses. And here we're going to start defining our variables. So the first variable is going to be our block break config. So this variable is literally our block break config, so this class. And the second variable is going to be of the same type as this builder codec. So this builder codec is string array. So here we're going to have a string array, and I want to name it allowed blocks. This allowed blocks variable contains the data from the configuration file. And what we want to do is we want to set the data from the configuration file and replace our data with it. So what we're going to do is block break config dot allowed blocks equals allowed blocks. What this is doing is it's getting the block break config class, so this class, and it's setting the allowed blocks variable here to the allowed blocks it fetched from the configuration file. So whenever an admin or a user updates the configuration file, we can make sure our mod has the correct values that the admin or user set. After this allowed blocks, I'm going to put a comma and then hit enter one more time. Next, it looks like we need a getter. This one was a setter. It tells the codec how to set our variable from config to the one in our code. And then this one's a getter. It tells the codec how to get our variable. And what we're going to do here, again, is have parentheses, and we need to define a variable one more time. And this variable is going to be our block break config, and we're going to type block break config, and we can either do dot allowed blocks, this works, but I like to do dot get allowed blocks, which is going to take advantage of our getter that we created earlier, or lombok if you have it. And then your IDE should underline this in yellow, and this is going to make our code more concise. So if you hover over it, it's going to say replace lambda with method reference, and so it'll make this nice and small. And now all we need to do is put .add after, and then we're done with our codec for this variable. Just to recap, a codec is kind of like a translation tool. So whenever the game code tries to load your code, it knows how to do it. And whenever you want to add a new variable to your config, you need to always remember to add a translator. Like, let's say we had a private, and this time we're going to do string, and we're going to do message, and it's going to equal hello world, right? Then all we need to do here is copy from .append down to .add, hit enter, and then paste it. And then we're going to need to just update the values here. So it's going to be new keyed codec. And instead of allowed blocks, we're going to call this message. Remember, capital first letter. And then builder codec is going to be of type string this time, because our type here is string. And then here, we're going to replace this variable from allowed blocks to message. And we're going to change the setter here from block break config allowed blocks to block break config message. And then we're going to set the message equal to this message from the parameters. And now you'll see a little underline because we need to set the getter to the right getter, and that's going to be get message. And for you, if you don't have lombok, the get message won't be there. So again, you're going to go to code and generate getter, and then select what getter you want to generate. And so now that we have this here, our config will know how to load a message variable. So for now, I'm going to get rid of this. But it's good to know if you wanted to add more variables, you could do it like that. So now that we're done with this, we can go back to our main class and we see there are no more errors here either. Okay, now that we have our config variable initialized, what we're going to do next is pass it into this block break event system constructor by typing in config. Because we created this variable, it's global scope, and this method can see it. But before we move on from the main class, we're going to save config. This.config.save. Now that we have this, we're going to go back to our block break event system and see that the errors are gone. And now that the errors are gone, we can build our plugin using the configuration I had you set up in the first video. So hit the run. All right, once it's done building, it should be in build, libs, and it should show up here. That's because my jar automatically goes to the mod folder. The way I did this is in the build.gradle, I have this tasks.jar, and the destination directory is my mod folder path. You can do this yourself in your build.gradle, but you don't have to do this. Instead, if you don't have this step, you can just copy the jar here by selecting it and pressing Ctrl+C. Again, make sure it's not the one with the -javadoc or -sources. It's going to be the top one here. You're going to have 3. I only have 2 because I have this set up. So you're going to copy the jar, Windows R, %appdata%, open that up, find Hytale. So you're going to be at this screen when you find Hytale, select user data, mods, and paste it, Ctrl+V, in here. Make sure your mod is loaded by right-clicking your world, looking in the mod section and making sure your mod is checkmarked here, and then hitting Save World Settings. Then you can just go ahead and join your world. Now that you're in your world, you're going to want to go back to your mod folder. You're probably going to be on this screen since you just uploaded your mod. You're going to want to go back, press on user data, press on saves, and then find the world you're in. Press on that one, press on mods again. You should see your very own folder here generated for you. Press on the one that says your config name.json. And now you can see our values that we defined in the code are populated here, and we can even add new values here. You can learn how to modify this file from YouTube, but it's pretty straightforward. All you need to do is add a comma, space, and then add a new value. So every time you want to add a new value, make sure there's a comma after the old value, and make sure you have quotes. Our default value is soil dirt. Now that our plugin is loaded and we defined only dirt as an allowed block, any other block we break won't show a message in chat. But if we go over here and mine this dirt, you can see in chat says you mine soil dirt, you mine soil dirt. There you go. Any other block won't do anything. And you can add as many blocks to your config as you want. This is obviously a very bare bones example, but if you wanted admins or players to be able to modify your plugin values, then this is going to be super powerful. Let's go to game mode adventure. I'm going to put my pickaxe in my first slot. And then just place these down and just try mine. There you go. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you want more tutorials, please let me know. These tutorials are super fun to make, and I love seeing people get use out of them. So again, please let me know if you have any ideas or questions. Join the Discord. I'm active on there, and you can message me some questions, or if you run into any errors, you can message me that as well.